Welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and today I'm visiting with Rick Eriksen, and he's here because of our Meet the Professor series.
Yes.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
The digital graphics, digital illustration, world domain empire, the world of Oz, all belongs to you.
Well, that's the best way
I
think I've heard it
and
put.
So, we want the listening audience to learn more about what they will get because they don't know what they're going to get when they come to Middlesex Community College and they say, "Oh, I want to learn about using the computer to create visual images to communicate information."
Right.
And that's what you do. So how did you go from graduate school in liberal studies to being a wizard, the Wizard of Oz?
It was a crazy path with lots of bricks. They were yellow and other colors. How did I get there? What
did you do in your graduate program? Like, what did you write a thesis at the end that was a culminating?
No, that would be primarily, most of my experience was definitely professional. And so being in the trenches. So what ended up happening was actually out of my bachelor's, I ended up, first I had out of my bachelor's, I had a great internship at a place called Olive Jar Animation, where I was doing stop motion animation. Actually, I was sweeping the floors, really, there. But that was kind of my first exposure to sort of broadcast and film, because that's actually what I was going to do. Leaving that, and really, I actually, when I had gotten out of the bachelor's, that's what I ended up doing. I stayed there for a little bit, doing some animation, doing like little animated promos for, this is dating me, for MTV, things like that, Nickelodeon. And then from there, what ended up happening? I decided, actually, what was very interesting was I was up at Boston at the time, living in Boston. And actually, everything I owned had gotten completely stolen, so I was robbed. And I was like, oh, what a great way that the actual board has been erased. Let's go for this. So I actually ended up setting up a little studio and going, oh, well, I'll create films and do video editing and that sort of thing. How perfect. So I ended up doing that for probably about 6 months and also doing a sort of other freelance, thinking, you know what I'm liking more than actually editing and doing this is things that I didn't really study in school, which was the animation, the creating of the art, using the computer for just to create title sequences, things of that nature. And I thought, who knew, Though it was connected to the stop motion and the animation. So I ended up actually for about a year and a half just sort of digesting everything I could at that time about just computers, creating art on computers, how to animate using, because at the time, again, I don't want to date myself, but it was pretty low end at that point.
I'm curious about what the kind of software that people have in their homes or that comes resident now.
Back then, are we time traveling back then?
Yeah, we are. So what could you?
Well, back at that time, it was so funny. Back I remember, at that point, limited colors. So here we are building graphics with palettes of 4 colors.
Wow.
So what 4 colors are you going to use? Then if you want to animate that, what does that mean? Because the processing power, even just to do that at the home level, was really pretty tricky.
So did you have professional software when you were freelancing and sitting alone in your garret?
Believe it or not, that the stuff that I was using at that time was really being passed as professional level. I mean, it wasn't broadcast live, but it could definitely be used. And so that sort of set the stage for me to be able to make the next leap into the next professional level, which was good.
So let's take a break and come back. I want to hear about those early days.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, welcome back to Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Anna Wasesha and president of the college here, and I'm talking with Rick Eriksen, who really is one of my most favorite professors here because he's just so much fun to talk to. So we're going to time travel back to Boston. The turn of the century, or possibly before the turn of the century.
No, I don't want to put date to it.
Yeah, okay, all right. But we're time traveling back, and we're talking about software, and you were holding up in your studio.
Yeah, how? Because you led with how did you train? How did you get to where you are? And it's so funny that it didn't happen traditionally. It was sort of through the professional sort of avenue. But I mean, I still, coming out of school, I still was only doing freelance stuff, so I wasn't at a professional level. But what I was doing, just the goofiness, the title sequences, the animation, the exploration, that kind of learning, while I was, trying to survive with other sort of gigs, allowed me to create a portfolio, and also just to have exposure to just learning at my own pace, the software, but the technology through. And at that time, seriously, it was periodicals. Anything that I don't want to say the web was not like woohoo, but we weren't there yet. And so it was through that, and then through, of course, connection networking, that I met someone who said, "Oh, you do that sort of stuff. You should totally talk to a friend of mine," which led me to an interview over at ESPN at that time. And from there, it was so funny. It was like showed sort of this cheesy demo reel, but they did have actually some quality stuff from the internship, and that was pretty key.
Was it a physical reel?
No, that's so funny. And I'm dating myself saying real. But no, at that time it was, well, I can't believe it. At that time, VHS tape, which half of these people are like, what? But yeah, it was at that point, so it wasn't real. There were reels inside there. Mm-hmm. So from that, I think it was less than a week, I got a phone call back saying, hey, come on board. We have, we have a place for you in the graphics department. And then all of a sudden, I was working on shows, just doing graphics for SportsCenter.
And what does that mean, graphics?
Doing, like when you watch news or you watch an informational program, 75% of it is just full screen graphics or graphics kind of tossing out information. Infographics for television. But think sports, and then think of the stats, and think of the scores, and think of the...
And is it also the crawl?
It's also the crawl. It's so much more. And sort of just to kind of cruise through that. So that was an awesome playground. That was where now I was like, oh, wow, I'm not, now I have like $250,000 pieces of equipment. And I'm on these crazy shifts of, not third shift, but like midnight to whatever, 7 a.m., where you're just working on an edit after you build the graphics, do the design work. It's just like you're sitting around and you're like, oh, let's play with this piece of equipment. Let's see what this does. And so that was a big part, was that I was just continuing that, but now in a professional environment, which is pretty cool. And so the graphics, from there it was, those are just straight television graphics, but there's a lot of things like those lower third crawls that need to be automated. Or, for instance, at the time I started working because of just sort of the tinkering, like taking apart stuff, trying to figure out how it works, plus the creative aspect and the design that I had. They would tie me with like the computer folks that were collecting all the data from like the NASCAR cars. And they're saying, oh, how can we get this data? How can we get it in a visual form on screen? And so it was kind of, I was kind of the work between now the artists plus the tech people getting this data and then making that sort of...
Tell me the data.
So for instance, how fast the car's going, when they shift, the RPMs, all that sort of data that's coming off of the car, they want to put that into that virtual dashboard. So as you're watching, you got visual going out of the car, you're seeing all that data sort of visually. So from that to, just to basically designing, we have a new ESPN 2's coming on board, or the X Games are coming on board. We need to, not only have the look of the show, from the typography to the elements, the graphic design elements, just the general feel. So working on projects like that, and then trying to figure out how that's going to work into the graphic systems. So, all these pieces that you design, how is that going to work on those lower thirds that you're talking about, that do sponsorship, and how we're going to have that automated. And so really, I was through ESPN kind of doing all of these, wearing various different hats, that really that's hard to convey, and it's hard to say where do you go to school for, okay, there was graphic design from the static sort of things in a sports center or a news show, package show, to now dealing with sort of, this automated interactivity. It needs to be able to pull graphics and composite them, place them different places on the screen, to then just working on, going from scratch on a concept of a show, saying, "Hey, we're thinking of doing this network show, and it's going to have this vibe, and this is the market." And so now working with artists, being on those teams, and then seeing all of these different avenues of from static to motion and so forth to sort of the interactivity as well. It's so funny, now you're getting me to time travel, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And then there was I remember working ESPN Radio and coming up with that reminds me.
That's a little hard to be visual on.
Well, you know what? It reminds me of actually one of those moments where you're like, oh right, I remember working at right around that time on the Bug, and the Bug was such a new novel concept. The little ID bug, and again, dating myself, in the corner of the screen on your television, on the television screen. Oh, right, we're on ABC or we're on Fox, At that time, I remember working on like the first, the ESPN, the ESPN2, even the ESPN Radio, because they would broadcast the shows. And so working on bugs, those weren't around.
But a bug's not a virus.
No,
a bug's like a little logo.
Oh my gosh, it's like it's so funny. You'd think with the whole computer thing, I'm talking about a virus. No, but the bug is that logo, that ID logo that's in the ever present in the corner of the shows that you're watching.
Sure.
Before you go to the ads, and it's so funny. That's that moment too. Now that I'm thinking about it, design, technology, all these things coming together. I remember joking to someone I was working with, going, this doesn't bode well that we're designing this piece, and that on the one level you're like, oh cool, it's branding, and what a great thing we're doing to our product. But then you're thinking about like, oh, at an artistic level, oh wait, the frame, the composition, the design, and now we're putting a rubber stamp on that. So it's so funny that these moments, these little time travel moments, are reminding me of the clash of technology, design, good,
sure.
bad, that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah.
So that was, that was primarily ESPN, was a lot of kind of travel through that. And that was a lot of training in live, fast-paced, kind of produce graphics, produce informational graphics, promotional things, really quick turnaround. Another interesting part of that was working. I was on the X Games team for the first when that just started happening. So it was like, I remember at the time, the Olympics for the younger generation, or the tattoo generation kind of thing, skateboarding and the extreme sports. And working that was interesting because we were, that was doing live events, and then just churning out these graphics and churning out designs, like a little bit like McDonald's, pushing the fry leader button. But that was, again, live events, another thing that was very difficult to sort of train in, until you get thrown into that environment. So at that point, again, don't want to date myself.
This
but
is a dateless program.
It's a dateless program, I know. At that point, it was also interesting being in a giant news organization, and it was sports, granted, but to see all of the feeds, just to see the feeds coming in from, and to see, not only the screen-based feeds, but sort of the non-traditional ones you don't sort of see, like the Reuters, the two, and and also to look over there and go, wow, it's on a real old school display teletype kind of thing, and you're thinking the date, and just to see this whole picture and realize that you're at that point that the distribution was changing. It was like, ooh, again, not to date myself, but where you would normally have an idea, you need money and then a big production outfit to get this idea out. This web thing, this is looking pretty cool. This is looking like you have an idea, you want to push that idea out. You're not necessarily restricted by the money or just the way you can broadcast. And so that was definitely a moment where I thought, this is a direction to go in. At the same time, I was starting to do the graphic work and to do that sort of work. That's when I was thinking, maybe it's time to do freelance. Maybe it's time to step away and actually start training, because when you're in the machine can, it can start looking a certain way. And so it definitely seemed like a moment where I was already training people internally on how to integrate the graphics. That's so true at the time before I started teaching. But right before I started teaching, I was already sort of doing training sort of as I was exiting sort of the professional, that broadcast realm.
So just to flip back a moment in this dateless, timeless zone that
Yes.
we're living in at the moment, what did you major in undergraduate school?
Broadcast and film, and produced, it was very sort of television focused. And then, like I said, I went into, my internship was at an
Olive
animation,
Jar.
at
What
an
a great
animation
name.
house. And so that was some really cool exposure that then led sort of into the sort of this self kind of journey through, okay, I'm in a professional environment, let's go.
So,
ride
but no
this.
studio arts?
Very
no...
little studio arts. So at the time, that's where I was kind of doing the graphic design, motion graphics was awesome. That was when it was starting to happen.
Yeah.
And so to be right there, and then I think also to be a motivated tinkerer was pretty key.
Right. And also extraordinarily just creative.
I think that's also something that definitely has to factor in. I mean, I don't want to toot any horn, but that's a definite thing that needs to be exercised.
Yeah. So okay, well, we've only, we've time traveled in this timeless zone just for, a few nanoseconds or decades, depending on how you look at it. We'll come back and we'll try to reel ourselves back toward the present.
Towards the present?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll be right back. Well, we're back to the Middlesex Moments radio show. Rick Eriksen is telling us the tale of his development as a graphics designer and illustrator, totally in the digital realm. Really.
Yes,
and on the World Wide Web.
That is true, and I think that's actually ultimately what made it very accessible to me, was because we were joking before about, well, where's your fine art background? Where's your fine art traditional studio sort of stuff? And because I jumped into television, and was designing in that realm, and connected to understanding the sort of the digital, how it worked digitally, even sort of at that stage, that's where the training happened. Was, how does this system work? What does, being also surrounded by people who know how to design, and you're just constantly getting that, hearing that dialogue, seeing it. And then coupling that with the technical sort of thing was, that was definitely the advantage of and training that was just priceless. I mean, because at the same time I'm on teams where we're like, all right, we're just whatever. What's an Emmy? I mean, if other people are like, ooh, you got that. We were just like, wow, this is fun. What are we doing today? Type of thing.
How did you get that Emmy?
That was primarily, there were 3 that all came kind of from the X Games and working.
And by X Games, you mean not Xbox, you mean extreme sports.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is, I know, I'm dating myself a little bit, going back to ESPN X Games, which was kind of the, ESPN2, that edgier sort of, I don't want to say Olympics, but the extreme, we were throwing that around, the extreme, sports Olympics kind of thing.
So which sorts of extreme Olympics did you cover?
There was everything, skateboarding, street lugeing,
Street
the
lugeing,
BMX
like
biking, and it would be live event. So it would be for a week at, in Providence or in Colorado during the winter X Games and the summer X Games, and so it was about a 2-week. You'd go to we'd head out and we just produce stuff for the front end week, and then during the live event. So it was like basically producing, kind of the Olympics on site kind of thing. That actually set me up to there was a lot of travel at that point. So I was doing graphics and graphic production. But I started traveling out of the country, going to stations that wanted to join ESPN International. And so we had a look, a brand, graphics, the way we did things to ensure that happened on air. And so I would go into a place and sort of assess, okay, what are their technical capabilities? How can we make our graphic look work with their equipment? And then how can they design and continue, that sort of thing. And at that point, that was when I was also doing sort of the web stuff, and I thought this is a time I can move away. I can move away from this. I can continue to freelance. I'd made the network connections, And now I can actually maybe clue some people into how to promote better ideas than just the let's sell products kind of thing. And so that was a big drive of saying, all right, I'm not sure I want to travel the globe and keep doing this sort of thing. I mean, that was great, but maybe it was, and I was actually teaching at the time. I was teaching part-time. And I just thought, this is it. This is this is a very empowering thing happening. Get people to be able to use this tech, because now it's approachable. You don't need the $250,000 setup. Wow, this is happening on a desktop. I'm cooking animations that I'm on a at the time $3,000 machine and selling them as if again you were producing them on equipment that was far more expensive. So definitely that was the shift. And then to realize that, hey, anybody could do this. They just need the training. They just need to, and hopefully to get them at a point, and that's true. That's a little bit of what now the Wesleyan and the Masters sort of coming out of that and saying, all right, well, there was no place I could go to get better training than what I had. And so what do I do? So I thought, well, I need to get better, fresh perspective on how people instruct others and teach. I had been doing a technical professional environment, but so the Wesleyan thing, I mean, classes that you chuckle, which were so impactful for me, life-changing, like a Zen class, Zen Buddhist class, how does that relate to graphics and design? But I mean, that's the core of the message. And if we're going to use this technology for good, I mean, I hate to say it, that's my hope, to get folks to not just use it to spread a message to consume, but to spread a message we can hopefully change or balance or whatever. So it's funny that to some degree I think was a very well-rounding component to be able to actually have that side of the education coupled with the ability that is something broken, let's fix it, let's take it apart. Do we want to produce a show, a comedy, something like that? Cool, done that. Have the, how large is the utility belt? So the experience, my professional experience, has given me kind of everything from the idea, production, through execution to, this has got to be ready and, on air and in 30 seconds, no problem, we'll get it, it'll happen, that kind of intensity. All of that has, I think, kind of created this now what you have here at Middlesex, and what I'm attempting to try to do for students coming in. What is it that you want to do in new media production? Always, really for me, it's been about the media production. What is it that you want to create? What is the idea? And then how we're going to execute that in a really aesthetically pleasing a way that's going to succeed in getting that creative message. So, being able to be in an environment where I can actually stress to people, hey, the importance is not that you're going to specialize in one particular thing, because you have to be careful that's going to be automated. Whatever it is, I mean, whether it moves to a template, or it's automated, you have to be able to adapt and have sort of that creative problem-solving skill set as it relates to producing media. Because, I mean, really, and that's here to stay. I mean, that's been here, and it's not much different, the essence or the core of successful, media production. And then you just tack the new, and what's the new? Is it a wearable? Is it the fact that we're seeing more signs and visual things that are changing? Who's designing that? What's that message? And even down to then now you got to get into the social media in terms of how does, in whatever way avenue that you want to travel down, you're really going to have to actually create that portfolio, that your brand, and the way that you're going to promote yourself out to either the employer or the partner who's going to move that message and move the production and move the idea forward. So it's there's so many hats that I think that someone needs to wear in terms of the digital media, new media production. So it's kind of a joy to be in. It's professional, but it's kind of exploratory professional, which is wonderful. I don't know if that makes sense to kind of wear the travel to through, I don't want to see Yellow Brick Road, but to where we are now.
Yeah, sounds a little like a magic shop to me.
I do. Well, and that's definitely the beauty of it, is because it really is. I think that from my perspective, it's also the beauty of being able to say, wow, I can't believe I started, again, dating myself. Ultimately sort of started at the beginning of this particular art form, which is, I remember being intrigued by, a rectangle on a screen that you could move it around. It was like, oh wait, this is an Etch-a-Sketch, but at a different level, and it was really just on and off, white, black, and then to see that evolve and actually be part of it, to be part of producing media using that technology, to the extent that now you're just, you see where that art form has actually evolved from, this, the screen-based interactive art. That's been a pretty crazy ride.
Yeah, and I assume that there's a kind of a fine art level of that and a utilitarian level of that in that whole domain of digital art.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think that I don't think we haven't had enough exposure to, I think, the fine art component of it. I think it's just like where you have the fine arts, where you have your commercial art and your illustrative art and your graphic design, hey, sell the product kind of thing. You see that for the most part, but then there's been this rich history of fine art that you just have. With digital media, you just haven't seen that. I mean, there are opportunities for installations and things like that, but we just, for instance, gaming. The fact that gaming was given that gaming thing. It's now difficult to look at. It's difficult to look at it as, well, wait a sec, is this an art form? Well, of course, it was an art form when it was a rectangle, moving around on the screen and someone's interacting with it. Fantastic. It's an art form now that we're doing full-length movies that are like one step away from photorealism, if not already there. So it's this production playground that I just, I think that is wonderful and really has so many creative opportunities.
I can't believe it, but we've run out of time. And actually, I can believe it. So Rick Eriksen, who's a professor of
digital arts, multimedia.
At Middlesex Community College,
yes.
right here in Middletown, Connecticut. And it's really a magic playground. So I think anyone who is interested in, and may I just say, anyone who wants to take a single course just as an exposure, or who is interested in the program, should come over and see you, or look you up online in our World Wide Web at mxcc.edu. Thanks so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you.
And this is Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, wishing you all a very good day.